You know what? We need a little bit of history here. The folding kick scooter as we know it was invented in the 1990s in Switzerland by Micro Mobility Systems and released in the US in 2000 as the Razor scooter. In 2003 they released their first electric model, and now in 2023 we have
this thing, the Ausom Gallop. And that's not a description, that's the name, which means that immediately this has a lot to live up to.
But first, some specs. Dual motors putting out 1200 watts apiece, brought to a stop by dual hydraulic disc brakes, a 52 volt, 23.2 amp hour removable battery, or 1.2 kilowatt hours, 55 mile range, 41 mile an hour max speed, 10-inch pneumatic tires, 6-hour charging time when using the dual charging ports, front and rear suspension, folding stem, a full suite of lights including turn and brake signals, a functional dashboard, and a max load capacity of 265 pounds.
And the battery is indeed removable.
just undo this combination lock here and flip up the floorboard. And Bob's your uncle.
You can even charge the battery separately. It's got a replica of the two charging ports right there on it. Nifty. The battery itself is extruded aluminum, I believe, and I looked up the part numbers on this and found some industrial uses, so I almost wonder if someone didn't just happen upon a whole bunch of unused industrial batteries and decided to make a scooter around them. But that's just a theory. Again. Quick note on that range figure though, their website states the Ausom Lab achieved a maximum range with a load of 165 pounds riding at a constant speed of 9 miles an hour on a flat road at 78 degrees Fahrenheit without strong winds. And I appreciate that very much, because while it's not exactly a realistic way to expect someone to ride this, it's still nice that they showed you how they achieved that, unlike most battery range statistics for personal EVs, which are just pulled from thin air, maybe dropped from a plane. The marketing on Ausom's website for this describes it as SUV-like, which to me conjures up images of a Ford Explorer, a Honda CR-V, which kind of seems like doing this a bit of a disservice, because to me this is less like a Ford Explorer and more like a Ford Raptor. And that seems to include safety as well, because this general shape does not lend itself well to safety. Tiny wheels are darty and easily upset by any ruts that are too large for the suspension to absorb. In two-wheel drive mode, the front wheel tries its best to fling the scooter out from underneath you if you have the steering turned while you get on the throttle at all. This length to height ratio means that the steering stem is whipping back and forth over bumps and whoops, and the reinforced steering stem here is just waiting to mangle your body if you happen to fall off while trying to find an underground path to China.
I did find something interesting in the marketing material for the Gallop's sister model, the Leopard, and that was the phrase, "conquer the urban jungle." And I think they might be onto something with that.
Small wheels may fall into ruts and dirt tracks, but the suspension does a great job of soaking up uneven pavement from our crumbling infrastructure. And a variety of options for foot placement keep my arthritic knees from seizing in one place, because the long range really means I can explore a whole lot of the city. And the 41 mile an hour top speed helps me avoid being a roadblock to Chevy Suburban drivers who are too busy scrolling through TikTok. One thing to mention is that there is a hidden menu, which is hidden so well they show you how to get to it in the owner's manual. I recommend finding that menu and turning acceleration down by 2 and turning regenerative braking up to 4. That's right, this thing has regenerative braking. It's just not enabled by default, which is in reality blended braking. So when you get on the brakes, the first bit of the brake travel, as it were, is regenerative, recharging your battery and not using the physical brake at all, meaning you probably won't overheat the brakes as bad on long descents, and you'll have a lot more braking capacity left to you. And turning the acceleration down is mostly useful for the two-wheel drive modes, because unlike engaging 4x4 in a car or truck, you're not just splitting the available torque between the front or the rear, you're doubling the output. So even when you're in mode 1, if you hit the single dual button, you suddenly have twice as much torque. And I don't love the way they've implemented this, because the front and the rear wheel react exactly the same all the time. Some people may like that, but what that results in is the front end
just never has traction ever. It's always spinning, it's always doing little burnouts when you take off. It is incredibly difficult to manage. I would like to have more of a torque split from the front to the rear. Maybe the front doesn't get 100% as much power as the rear all the time. Maybe it comes in a little slower, but for now, turning down the acceleration is what yielded the most pleasant result to me. Doing burnouts is fun all the time until you have to replace the tire. That's less fun. Some of this might be down to the thumb throttle not having quite enough resolution. Personally, I would prefer a trigger throttle for something like this. For me, I found the setting that was the most usable and comfortable in this was mode 2 rear wheel drive for blasting around town. But if you're gonna do that, you might as well save $300 and get the Leopard.
In the time that I've had this, I've put about 150 miles on it, and I have really been beating it like a rented mule, trying to put it to the test. I even wrecked it a couple times, one of which was a 20-mile-an-hour spill on a dirty sidewalk that was actually bad enough that my phone called 911 for me. Fortunately, the scooter itself was okay, and I ended up being fine as well, though I did land right on top of this. That felt good. One thing I have noted during this time is that the battery gauge is purely fiction. It takes forever to drop the first few bars off, and the last 40% of it, forget it. Once you're down to 40% indicated on the bar graph, you've got half a mile left at most. The longest I got out of it personally was 27 miles of range before it stopped moving, but I was beating it pretty hard. Our average speed during that ride was 13 miles an hour with frequent blasts up to 30, so pretty middle of the road abuse, and I still got a decent amount of the quoted range out of it, so I was pretty impressed by that. One advertised number I did beat was the top speed. They advertised 41 miles an hour, I got 42, and I won't be doing that again. It was frightening. Something I have noticed is just how exhausting this is to ride. People talk a lot about dirt biking being one of the most physically demanding sports out there, but on a dirt bike you can sit down. You can't sit down on this. You're constantly having to hold yourself up and pull yourself forward against the acceleration, and it is exhausting. The Gallop, this is the Gallop. The Leopard, this thing's younger cousin, does include a detachable seat. I don't know why they left that out on this one, because honestly I think that would be really nice, but there you go. Well, at this point in the video, I think it's time to come to some conclusions, but the question of if I think the Gallop is good or not isn't exactly that straightforward, because it really comes down to whether or not this is the type of thing that you like. I personally don't really understand the market segment for these small-wheeled, dual suspension, off-road, two-wheel drive scooters, though it is a fairly large market segment. My girlfriend, on the other hand, loves this thing, and she'd ride my Gallop every chance she gets. That said, I do like to think that I have the ability to evaluate things objectively based on its merits within its market segment. Like, I despise crossovers, but I still recognize that the Toyota RAV4 and the Honda CR-V are very good crossovers. To sum up my experiences with this scooter, I've put about 300 miles on this thing in the time that I've had it, in all kinds of terrain. Streets, off-road, even took it on some mountain bike trails in Eureka Springs and did some incredibly steep hills there, all of which this really had no problem with. It definitely made its way through all kinds of terrain with no real problems. It's also been wrecked probably half a dozen times at this point, and it's just kind of got some minor scrapes here and there, but no real damage to speak of. Nothing broke, nothing changed functionally, nothing snapped or bent. It's been pretty damn durable. The only two things that have changed as I've been riding it is the rear brake has gotten a little bit soft. I think it just needs bled. That is something that happens with hydraulic systems every now and then, especially ones like this where I'm putting it at all odd angles in my car and sideways, upside down, and what have you. And then the front brake will squeak intermittently, which I believe just means the caliper needs adjusting. Again, these aren't really problems with the Gallop, just kind of known quantity maintenance things with hydraulic disc brake systems. So now that we know what my experience has been like and the context of where I'm coming from, we're gonna start here with the cons of the Ausom Gallop. Get the bad out of the way first. Comparing this to other scooters in its class of off-road two-wheel drive things, the biggest con I can think of here is part support. As of filming this on Ausom's website, there is not a place where you can go and buy parts like replacement hub motors, batteries, etc. However, this does seem to mainly be composed of commodity parts, so you can find that stuff elsewhere on the internet, including other manufacturers of scooters like this. I believe this is a white labeled scooter, meaning that this frame and components are sold under several different names from different suppliers for different prices. Ausom actually being one of the cheaper suppliers of bikes, of scooters that look like this. White labeling is not a bad thing because it means there's multiple companies financing the production of these parts, which means that they'll be available for longer and better supported. And in this case, I have found other suppliers of very similar looking scooters that do have their parts around. You know, for example, the battery is, as near as I can tell, a commodity thing used in several scooters and even industrial equipment, and you can buy them for about $800 if you want a second battery. There you go. My gosh, that's got to be 80% of the cost of the scooter right there. I mean, the scooter's $1,200. If the battery's $800, how did they build the rest of it so cheap? So that con turned out to be kind of a softball. Ooh, the part support isn't great, except it actually is because this scooter exists in multiple places. And like I alluded to, the main pro of this thing is gotta be its price. This is probably the cheapest I've seen scooter that looks like this, but with different brands on it, sold for. I mean, usually this sort of thing is $2,000 and up. The name brand versions of this, I'm not gonna name them here, but they're red and black, are like in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. And I've ridden those back to back with this, and I did not get the impression that it was 3 to 4 times the experience as this thing. As near as I can tell, there aren't really any objective functional shortcomings to this scooter, just subjective ones, which is, for me, the fact that I just don't understand this form factor. The suspension and pneumatic tires are fantastic. Not necessarily for off-roading, because the small wheels kind of make off-roading a bit of a non-starter, but for, you know, crappy sidewalks, going over curbs, that sort of thing, it is fantastic for getting around the city. The downside being that it adds weight, so you're not really going to be picking this up and carrying it with you onto the bus, but this has enough range that you might not even need to. You can just go. The biggest problem for me is that the front wheel does exactly the same thing as the rear wheel. If you whack the throttle to 100%, that gets 1200 watts and that gets 1200 watts. And that results in this one either spinning itself to death or kind of making the front end real twitchy, because it also means that if the front is turned, it's pulling the bike out from underneath you. Obviously skill issue, just get better at riding it. But there's a very good reason that a 50-50 torque split isn't common in all-wheel drive cars, or even the few motorcycles that exist are two-wheel drive. I think they have more, something like 35% of the torque going to the front. At the very least, I would like for the front to have more of a gentle application of power. You know, maybe the rear comes on instantly, but the front sort of ramps up a little bit, just so that you can get moving and then you get the full 2400 watts of pull. Something like that would go a long way to making the two-wheel drive more usable and not just something that I flip on the rare occasion that I actually need all 2400 watts or need the two-wheel drive to climb a hill or get through some thick grass or something. On more expensive, you know, full-size vehicles, they have traction control to help with this. I think this could probably be done just with some firmware programming, so Ausom. It would be basically free for you to update the firmware, and then that would be a bullet point you could put in your literature that is completely different from everyone else. You could say it has traction control or torque management. There's a freebie idea for you. I'll beta test it for you if you want. So is the Gallop a good value? There we go, Jake. We're finally getting to the actual point here. Yes, I think it is a good value for what it is. However, I wouldn't buy the Gallop. I would buy its little brother, the Leopard, which is also a dual suspension, pneumatic tired off-road scooter. However, it is far cheaper and rear-wheel drive. And right now, I think it's actually really cheap because Ausom's having their spring sale. So if you want to check out the Gallop or the Leopard, which personally is the one that would be my choice, you can check Ausom out in the links below. There might be a affiliate link, I don't remember. There might be a sale going on now, depending on when I actually get this video out. Either way, give them a look. Give my other e-bike and e-scooter reviews a look. I might have several of them by now. And thanks for watching.